In today's readings, the Apostle Paul addresses strong words to a community that is fighting. And Jesus picks a fight in the community that raised him. The love passage from 1 Corinthians 13 is perhaps one of the most beloved and well-known portions of Scripture. We see it in artwork, in embroidery. We hear it at many, many weddings, and a lot of us could probably quote much of it by heart. But it was written by a celibate single man who was hopping mad. Paul wrote it to the church in Corinth, which he founded. That community at that time was tearing itself apart. Just basically take all of the gospel values and turn them upside down. And that's what was going on at Corinth. Backstabbing, infighting, greed, disregard for the poor, anti-hospitality, and cheap sex. And Paul was mad. And so Paul told them the truth. Unless they turned away from their selfish ways and put others first, unless they live into the love that he describes so beautifully, the agape love, the love of God for everyone, the all-inclusive love of community, they'll destroy themselves and one another. That love of God acting in them and through them, Paul tells them, along with faith and hope, is the only thing that can redeem them and enable them to live into the life that their baptism promised them. Now, Jesus, you'll recall from just a January, earlier in the month, the baptism of Jesus, and we heard those beautiful words of the image of the dove descending and landing on him, and heard those words that are for all of us. You are my beloved child. With you I am well pleased. And we know that Jesus then walked off into the wilderness to be alone for 40 days as he was tempted by Satan, full of the power of that Spirit that he had received, that had been tested and tried in him. And he preached and he taught, traveling all over Galilee, his home region of the country, gathering followers, performing miracles and healings. And finally, he comes to his hometown of Nazareth. He preaches in the synagogue. We heard that sermon last week. And it's going really well. Everybody's pleased with the sermon. They're saying, wow, this is Joseph's son. Look how he's grown up. He's got so famous, and we're here, the hometown crowd. And at that moment, Jesus picks his fight. He picks a fight by telling them the truth that he knows is in their hearts. That they're thinking, he nails it on the head. They're thinking, here's our Jesus has gotten all big and famous, and now we're in on the ground floor of something big, right? It's a funny kind of dialogue because he plays both parts. He says what they're thinking, and then he responds to them. And his response is this: I know you've come here expecting a great show, but let me tell you how God works. God doesn't pick the in crowd. God always, and historically, has picked the least and the lost. And unless you walk in the self-giving love that also picks the least and the lost and draws the circle of inclusion as wide as it can possibly go, you're not on God's side. And then they try to throw him off a cliff. It was going so well. To hear. Jesus and Paul told their communities the truth. They told them the truth because they loved them. This way of agape self-giving, self-surrendering love that we are called to in Jesus. It is the only way to real and lasting life, to real and lasting peace, to real and lasting joy. And as our presiding Bishop Michael Curry is fond of reminding us, it is the only thing that can transform this world that is so often a nightmare into the dream that God has for us. But the way of agape love, this way of love that we're called to walk in following Jesus, is not an easy way. It threatens the status quo. It threatens the power and pleasure of ego, and so it will always be resisted, sometimes violently. And because it is self-giving love, because it seeks to include and love and seek the good and transformation of the other, it never responds violently. And so even though the people weren't able to throw him off the cliff that day, 3 years later, they did succeed in putting him on a cross. The powers of this world will always seek to crucify self-giving, agape, surrendering love. But if we don't have it, as Jesus and Paul tell us, if we base our lives and live out of the selfish assumption that God is on our side no matter what, we don't have that life that endures. The last 2 years have been some of the most trying times in recent memory, certainly in our part of the world and for most of us, and particularly in this valley, as we've lived not only through pandemic, but through fires. And also for many of us, for many different reasons, individually as well. It's layers of difficulty. I want to share with you this morning some of my journey over the past 6 months. This is probably the most vulnerable thing that I've ever done from the pulpit. And I don't do it because I need pity or sympathy or to be the center of attention. I do it because it's the truth. And I love you, and you deserve to hear the truth. And I also believe that the truth of what is, of suffering that comes to our way, and the cross that we are called to bear is the way of life, the only way of life. I share it with you because my story is a story of faith, hope, and love, and I hope that it will bring you more faith, hope, and love in whatever it is that you're going through. So many of you know that 7 months ago, I began to experience unaccustomed back pain that interfered with my everyday life and completely stopped my triathlon training, my biking, running, and swimming that I was doing in preparation for an event in July. In August, I began intensive physical therapy, and this was diagnosed as a repetitive stress injury. In November, as you know, I had unrelated surgery and took a month off as I recovered from that. But what you don't know is that later in the month of November, I was diagnosed with an episode of major depressive disorder, brought on by 18 months of chronic stress, by pain, and by the sudden loss of all the endorphins from my cardio exercise. I basically consider this a repetitive stress injury of the soul. The fall was really hard, but getting a diagnosis and the treatment and care that I've been receiving since then have helped me tremendously. I can't say that I'm all better, but I am learning to live a life that is sustainable. I'm rebalancing and I'm being renewed. And above all, I'm learning to depend day after day, moment after moment, not on my own resources, but on God. I'm having to practice what I've preached for 17 years. For the first time in my life, I've found something that pushing harder and working harder and trying my best to make it all better won't make it better. Just as my back injury shook my confidence in my body and interfered with my everyday life, so this depression has shaken my confidence in my brain and stopped me from living in the way that I would normally live. I consider that my biggest blessing through all of this is that a mustard seed of faith in me has allowed me to see and to know that even on the most difficult days, God's been present. I know that that's not always true for everyone, that they're able to experience that. On some days, hope did not seem very near. Hope did not seem like something I could act on. But hope was always there like the distant star, guiding the Magi. And love, the greatest gift. Love for God, love for my family, love for all of you, and even love for myself is what's kept me seeking the healing that I need and doing all of the things that I need to do to find that healing. I want you to know that I am here for you, not going anywhere. I still feel called to this ministry and to our ministry together. I firmly believe that God is not done with us yet. I know for me that God is using this experience, that it will ultimately be one of resurrection. And I believe that's true for our church as well, with everything that we're going through. I'm so grateful to Reverend Wendy, to our wardens, to our staff, to all of our leaders who stepped up over the last couple of months. I was on partial disability leave for December and January, and I'm going to be increasing my hours in February, but we'll still have some extra time to do the things that I need to do to continue to heal and build new habits. I know that many of you have similar struggles for yourselves or for others that you love. Depression is epidemic right now. And even as followers of Jesus and even as a priest of God, I am not immune, no special treatment. We all encounter the sufferings and struggles of this life, but as followers of Jesus, we get to know that we are not alone, that we follow one who has walked this way of agape, self-giving love, this way of the cross before us, and shown it to be, without a doubt, the way of resurrection, the way of real and lasting life. Faith, hope, and love endure. These three. And the greatest of these is love.